As countries continue to grow and expand, we're developing our societies to the extent of our nature. By the end of the Symposium event, 5 square kilometers of trees will have been cut down in the Amazon rainforest. But that's just a portion of the 11,000 kilometers that are deforested each year in the Amazon. In other places in the world, natural disasters continue to increase as a result of climate change. In 2022 alone, we had 87 tropical storms. Environmental challenges like this have become common. And while we recognize their existence, we often forget of the people who are most affected by it: the small, local, and indigenous communities of the world.
When we think about tackling these challenges, we usually think about the next big digital innovations or about bureaucrats making big decisions. But what if, instead of trying to tackle these issues through neo-colonial decision-making, we try to empower local communities and people to apply their generational knowledge and better equip their homelands to deal and tackle with these modern challenges?
Throughout this year, Santi and I researched and challenged our assumptions on how we can go through the world's global environmental challenges and build resilient futures by working with the communities instead of working for them.
We looked at 2 different case studies. The first one was about Amazonian indigenous groups, and the other one was about local communities in the Philippines. Now, while these may sound like 2 very different scopes, we were both able to reach the same conclusion. We need to protect local knowledge and apply it. Now, before we proceed with both of our case studies, we want to clarify. By no means are we members of these communities, and we are not speaking for them. These are simply the main takeaways from our research.
When thinking of building resilient futures, what stands out to me as someone who grew up in Brazil is the importance of indigenous knowledge. Did you guys know that indigenous peoples only represent 5% of the world's population, yet they protect 80% of the world's biodiversity? In the Amazon, more specifically, we have more than 1.5 million indigenous peoples who are actively working to protect the rainforest. They do this through stewardship practices established in symbiosis with nature. Unfortunately, these peoples are constantly being threatened by destructive extractivist activities such as mining and deforestation. On top of that, they're being threatened by the lack of land recognition and land sovereignty. As a result, these peoples are being forced to migrate due to the unfavorable conditions in their lands. In my research, I thought, how can we better support these indigenous groups? And the result that I found is through empowering local indigenous knowledge in the Amazon. Different studies have shown that indigenous peoples have complex and efficient technologies that are able to manage the environment. From natural systems built to improve poor soil quality, to adaptation strategies used to implement to boost fishing, indigenous peoples have proven over and over again that they are capable of adapting, being resilient, and preserving the environment altogether. So, the conclusion that I found is that when looking at resilient futures, we shouldn't necessarily rely on cutting-edge innovations, but on local indigenous knowledge.
Meanwhile, I looked into the issue of natural disasters and how they are dealt with in the Philippines, and I surprisingly found that the key of dealing with this issue might lie in local voices. The Philippines is one of the most vulnerable countries when it comes to natural disasters in the world. In 2022 alone, they were hit by 18 tropical storms, and they were also ravaged by 5 different earthquakes with a magnitude higher than 5. This is why, in the 1990s, the Filipino government took an initiative and developed a system known as community-based disaster management. What this system does is that the national government provides funds for local communities, which are known as barangays, and the barangays themselves are able to invest these funds to better train their people to deal with natural disasters and to develop better infrastructure. This way, local communities become active leaders in the development of plans that will affect their own safety, and they can guide outside help, such as from NGOs and volunteers, to best fit their choices and what their priorities are. Some key aspects of this model include the protection of vulnerable groups And another key aspect is the usage of local values and knowledge to better implement these solutions. So, with all of this in mind, it becomes clear that local knowledge has been efficient and is efficient solution to dealing with natural disasters. And this Filipino framework could be effectively implemented in countries all around the world and could be used so that local communities could have a voice in how they deal with their own issues and they could develop their own effective solutions.
While Santi and I were looking at different communities, we've both explored the power of empowering local voices. So, now that we understand their value, what is our role in empowering these communities?
First, we need to make sure that decision-making is fully participatory. What this means is that all changes should be implemented from the bottom up, not from the top downwards.
And this could look different based on the community we're working with. So for example, in Bolivia, the UN has already begun to facilitate cross-collaboration by bringing together different stakeholders, such as indigenous peoples, environmental organizations, public authorities, and private institutions to discuss on projects taking place in indigenous lands.
Meanwhile, in the Philippines, the barangays have been given the autonomy to make the best decisions for their own people, while still being able to collaborate with other communities to set strong foundations for a better future. So, with that in mind, we need to start shifting our focus into hearing and listening what the local communities have to say in dealing with environmental issues. This right here is only a short extract from months and months of research and investigation into the topic of creating better resilient futures. But despite all of the different lenses and perspectives that we have looked into, all pointed at one solution. We need to start listening and protecting local knowledge and the indigenous and traditional knowledge of the people.
These communities have accumulated generational knowledge. So, before we think of building resilient futures, we first need to recognize the knowledge of the people from the past and the present. If we come together to empower these voices, we will be able to find better solutions to the world's environmental challenges. But first, we need to stop and listen.
Thank you.